Welcome to the Armored Soil Podcast, brought to you by the Renville SWCD, where we look to bring real-life information on all things sustainable resources and agriculture. We believe that soil is invaluable and that protecting our soil is the key to sustainability of all aspects of life. Please like and subscribe to our page wherever you get your podcasts. The information you will hear about is personal experiences and in no way is agronomic advice. If you are interested in implementing the practices or techniques you hear about, we recommend you reach out to your agronomist, NRCS office, or local conservation district for ways to work them into your farming operation. For more information about our liability and our podcast, please visit renvilleswcd.com. With that, this week we have joining us Heidi Roundhorse, the Hawk Creek Watershed Project Coordinator. She will introduce us to the Hawk Creek Watershed Project and what they do over there, as well as Dean Dambroten, a Renville County farmer, who's going to talk to us about the living root and what keeping living roots in your soil can do for your operation. We hope you enjoy the conversation. Welcome back to the Armored Soil Podcast. We are joined by Heidi Roundhorse, the coordinator of the Hawk Creek Watershed Project. Heidi, thanks for joining us today.
Yes, thank you.
How are you doing?
Doing good. Thank you for having me.
Good. Well, let's start out with maybe give us a little background of the Hawk Creek Watershed Project, what your organization's here for, and how you can help landowners sustain resources.
Yeah, so the Hawk Creek Watershed's been around for probably about 26 years. Originally started in 1997 when a local group of concerned citizens and agency folks got together and said, hey, how can we address some of these issues that are going on in the watershed? So they formed the Hawk Creek Watershed Project. So we've been working ever since then. When people ask me, what do you guys do? What are you all about? I like to say, to simplify it, three main things we do are best management practices. So those are those projects on the ground that can help reduce erosion and that are going to improve our water quality. And then we do water quality monitoring. So lots of different types of monitoring that we do. And then the education and outreach component. So those are the three main things that we do. We partner a lot with our other local government entities like the Renville SWCD. You guys have been great to work with to get a lot of projects on the ground and do a lot of education and outreach. So a lot of our local SWCDs and counties and also state and federal agencies that we work with to get a lot of good conservation on the ground. So one of our main focuses is to reduce that erosion and to improve our water quality.
I'm glad you didn't drop a bomb and say we're terrible to work with.
And we did not make her say that. Let's just clear the record that she is here under her own will. Well, thanks for that little background. Now we'll get into more of the more nitty-gritty, more of the technical stuff. What do you think the number one practice that either structural, non-structural, that you're dealing with year to year that you see most landowners wanting to implement?
What are our non-structural and structural practices, though?
Well, so non-structural practices would be something more like an ecological, where we're looking at an actual growing system, whether that's cover crops, reduced till, no-till, conservation crop rotation, when we're actually using Mother Nature and what she gives us to impact that resource, whether it's our soil, our water, anything like that. Also, you deal with a lot of lakes. Renville County, we don't have many lakes, but I know you get up into Candiota County a bit, so you probably see more of those shoreline practices as well and some restorations. Structural, we're looking at more potentially, we're moving dirt, we're making berms, whether farmable, non-farmable, to temporary hold back water, putting structures in the ground, working with tile to provide us that water storage or to fix ravines and other items like that. That answer your question, Holly?
It does, thank you.
Yeah, I say the projects that we work on, it's all across the board. It's, structural, non-structural. We get all different types of phone calls from people. A lot of gully washout, especially if you've had a significant rain event, 4 or 5, even a couple years back, we had 8, 9, 10 inches. Got a lot of phone calls about, gullies or ravine heads that had eroded out and needed help addressing those issues. Like you said, the lakes, a lot of lake restorations, shoreline restorations, a lot of buffers. But we are seeing more and more, thanks to a lot more information that's being put out there about soil health and the importance of soil health. We're definitely seeing more people that are interested in soil health and want to implement that. So when we say soil health, we mean cover crops, reduced tillage, like your no-till, strip till. That really, I don't know if that was really talked about even 10 years ago. So it's really great to see a lot more people interested in doing those practices and wanting to get those on the ground. I think especially in this area, in the Hawk Creek Watershed, we're 81% cultivated crops or row crop. That's our land use. So how do we work with that, 4/5 of our acres? How do we address the erosion and the water quality concerns? Well, we can start with the farmland, and we can do practices that are going to improve our soil health and then lessen that erosion. It benefits not only our water quality, but also lots of farming benefits, with your weed control, and we can get into that. But, there's multiple benefits to that. So I think we're always going to have those structural issues just with the topography and the landscape of the watershed, but we are definitely seeing a growth in those non-structural practices.
And I think that's an important stat to point out is 4/5 of our land in your work area, as well as, as we get into all of Renville County, we're getting closer to 90% there of all of our land use is in agricultural row crop production, where we need to figure out how to look at more sustainable ways to keep agriculture producers growing food, because that is important for the economy. And if we can keep the economy going while still protecting our resources, that's a win-win for everybody.
Right on.
Absolutely. Right, because obviously there are some lands that probably shouldn't be farmed. They get flooded out every year. You're in a floodplain, or you're just not getting a good yield for the inputs that you're putting in. But that's not the case for all the acres. So it maybe doesn't make sense to put some of these acres into a grassland program, and that's where soil health can come in, where we can see more benefits, but we're not taking acres out of production.
Which I think is so important to make sure that you can make it work for everyone. You're not just pushing one program, you're pushing many different things. You're trying to encourage people however they can make it work.
Right.
Yeah. Every operation, every farm, every field is different. And so that's how we look at it as well, right? It's all that specific site, that scenario today. That's what makes it fun though. Like it's never the same day.
Oh, definitely. I never know what I'm going to walk into in the morning. I may have a plan for the day. Yeah, that's shot in 15 minutes. And I guess I'm doing this today.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's always something different.
Yeah.
You never really know what you're going to be dealing with, which sometimes is awesome. Like great opportunities come about, but sometimes you got a lot of fires to put out as well.
For sure. Mm-hmm. In your monitoring efforts, what are you looking at? How many sites are you doing annually? Can you talk about that process a little bit? And, maybe how, in your time with the Watershed Project, how the practices that you've helped contribute on the landscape, and maybe see how the water quality has changed since you've been tracking that monitoring? Yeah.
So with the Hawk Creek Watershed Project, we contract with 3 different entities, with MPCA, MDA, and Discovery Farms Minnesota, which is like a farmer-led group that has NRCS and the U of M involved. So we do different types of monitoring depending on which entity we're working with, but the bulk of our monitoring is with MPCA. We currently have 6 long-term sites that we monitor with them. We've been monitoring those for 10 plus years. And it's part of an overall state monitoring network. So they have sites all across the state that we're monitoring, trying to get this long-term data to see, are we seeing significant increases, decreases, what are we seeing here? So we have 6 sites that we've been monitoring for, like I said, 10 plus years. Main things that we monitor there are for phosphorus, your TSS, total suspended solids. Basically that's anything that's going to penetrate into the water, or I'm sorry, that's going to be in the water, that's going to not allow light to penetrate into the water. So basically we use that kind of as a gauge or as a measurement of how much soil is in the water, especially in our area here. Most of your TSS is composed of soil.
So
So
what would other examples of TSS be somewhere else?
leaves, twigs,
yeah.
dead animals. I mean,
Yeah.
you name it. Anything that's going to impede light from
Is that
penetrating.
the test when you use that little disc deal in the string?
A Secchi,
Yeah,
a Secchi disc, like in a lake. Yep,
Yeah.
you're getting a transparency reading there. Yep. That's usually, that's TSS, or kind of looking, a lot of times it's kind of looking at your algae growth, what the algae levels are. But, if you're in an area where there's a lot of livestock, potentially, we have a lot of E. coli impairments within the watershed. So if you have somebody who's maybe improperly discharging their livestock waste, that's going to impede as well. So basically, it could be anything that's going to impede the light. But here we use it kind of as a gauge to see how much soil erosion that we have on the landscape. So
What would you think kind of the status of the watershed is in terms of water quality?
my opinion is it's not good. It has improved from, a generation ago or decades ago, but it's still not good. For TSS, we're, I think, 1.5 to 2.5 times higher than what the criteria is that MPCA has set as, hey, this is the level that we want to be at. We're 1.5 to 2.5 times higher than that. For phosphorus, we're 2 to 2.5 times higher. Nitrogen, they're still working on what that standard is, but we're in some of the highest levels of nitrogen in the state. That's for all three, that we have some of the highest TSS, phosphorus, and nitrogen levels in the state. That's a problem.
And that nitrogen and phosphorus quantities, that's really what affects those algal blooms, that increased nutrients and everything in the water, right?
Yep, absolutely. Yep.
What would be the end result of having too much of those nitrogen, like the nitrogen, phosphorus, and those TSS? What could happen to our water bodies around here?
Yeah, especially on lakes. You don't see it so much on streams because it's water that's moving. It's not stagnant water, but yeah, on your lakes, if you see those algal blooms, that kind of like slimy green paint, if you will. That's what it looks like.
Smelly.
Yeah, it smells.
smelly.
I mean, obviously for recreation, like that's not fun to swim in or fish in. So recreational suitability is not good. But just looking at, having a fish or a macroinvertebrate or something that lives in the water survive in that is very difficult. All your plants as well. Just because it's a plant in a lake doesn't mean it's a weed. We need to have plants in those lakes. So it's going to basically impair the function of anything that's living in that water. They're not going to get enough oxygen to breathe. The light that they may need, especially plants, are going to need that light to grow, which then provides food and shelter and habitat for your fish. If you want to catch those big walleyes and all that, you got to have some habitat and some, spawning grounds for them. So it's very important for all of that.
And would you really want to be swimming in a water you can't drink?
Probably not.
Like, I don't think everybody's putting earplugs and nose plugs and
No.
Yeah.
And are you
Yeah.
rinsing off immediately once you hit the beach and forget, oh, I just got out of the lake, I can eat my sandwich now, all of that too, right?
Right.
So is it just you doing all this work, or
Yep, just me. It's
Oh,
all me.
there you go.
One-woman show. No. I'm just kidding. No, I cannot claim credit at all. We also have Dean Dambroten, who's our planner and field tech. He's been with Hawk Creek for 23 years now. He's been the one and only planner field tech for Hawk Creek.
almost since the conception?
Pretty much, yeah. And then we have Jordan Austin, who's our water quality and outreach technician. So Jordan does the bulk of all of our monitoring work. Yep.
Well,
But you
awesome.
keep the train on the tracks.
I try to. I don't know, maybe not a very straight track, but
Between
I try.
them and us throwing stuff at your organization as well, there's a lot that's going on there, but all the work is for the greater good, that's for sure. And we hope to have Jordan and Dean on at some point as well. We have as Heidi said, a very great relationship with the Hawk Creek Watershed Project. And as we continue down this podcast journey, we hope to have them on many times and that they can contribute as much as they would like. So With that, we're going to take a brief intermission to bring in our first producer, Dean Dambroten. Holly and I are going to step out, but you will continue to hear from Pam and Heidi for the rest of this episode.
Today, I am joined in studio by Dean and Heidi again. So please feel free to introduce yourselves.
Dean Dambroten. I farm in Wayne Township, way up in the northwest corner of Renville County. And I guess we switched over from conventional till in the fall of 2016 to no-tilling soybeans and strip tilling going to corn.
And hi again, I'm Heidi Roundhorst, and I'm the coordinator for the Hawk Creek Watershed project. So not only does Dean farm, but he and I work together, and he's worked with Hawk Creek for 23 years, I believe. Sorry, I don't know if you wanted people to know that.
Well, now they know.
Yeah.
All right. Well, Dean, so you kind of touched on it, but how did you get into farming and why did you get into farming?
Well, my great-grandfather homesteaded our farm in 1871, so it's been in the family for 153 years.
Oh, wow.
And it started out as a livestock and small grain, and then transitioned to corn and soybeans. The livestock went out, and we had sugar beets for 25 years. Now we got down to corn and soybean rotation. And we just realized that our organic matter was way lower than what it should be. I guess, everybody in our part of the geographical area is in the same boat, but we found out that we'd run our organic matter from the original 10.5% down to about 2.5% to 3%.
Oh, wow.
So,
No, that's a really good reason
and
to
it
get
takes
started.
a lifetime to build it back, we're finding.
Absolutely. You can get started, but it's a whole process. And as Holly likes to say, you got to be really intentional with how you.
Because over my
organic matter.
lifetime, I think I've just noticed, those white, lighter colored clay knobs and stuff on the hills. I think in my lifetime, they've gotten bigger. And, we're a young country yet, really. What's going to happen in another 150 years?
Absolutely. Yeah.
So we need to conserve our topsoil.
Absolutely. So is it just you on your operation, or who do you farm with?
No, I guess we're about my brother and I were like the third generation of brothers that ran the farm. And now my two sons, Ryan and Joe, they're kind of taking over doing the heavy lifting. I'm pretty much been demoted to financial manager.
Nothing wrong with that. A little lighter load.
So yeah, my dad and uncle farmed together, and my brother Jim and I farmed together, and now Ryan and Joe are taking over.
Oh, that's good. Keep it in the family.
Yep.
When did you first implement living roots? That's kind of what we want this first episode of our soil health to be about, is the living roots and just green seeding and how you kind of got into that and why that's been really important for building your organic matter back up.
Yeah, we went together with another guy that bought a strip till machine in the fall of 2016, and then we had him do that for 2 years. And then he went out of the picture, and then we got it hooked up with another Kyle Benoverbeck. I think everybody in the area knows who he is. He's been doing it since 2019 then. And then this fall, just before freeze up or late fall, we finally got our own strip till machine put together. We did about 100 acres with it, so we got it broke in and hopefully can go with it next year. And that was a big investment, but when we started this, we sold our four-wheel drive and all our tillage equipment. Mm-hmm. And when you consider that, it's not a big outlay of cash for new equipment.
No, absolutely.
So, yeah, and it saves us a lot in labor, time, fuel, hardware, changing shovels and equipment. We've reduced our rock picking. That used to be a several-day job every spring, and we just have very minor rock picking duties now.
That's really nice.
And we get our fall fertilizer put on with the strip till machine. So when spring comes, we just plant. We don't have to wait for fertilizer. We don't have to do any tillage, and hardly any rock picking. We can just get going, get the crop in the ground.
No, that's so good. So with switching to strip till and having to do your own fertilizing, was that scary for you, or was that nerve-wracking going from co-op, or have you always done your own fertility plans?
Well, as it was our custom operators that have been doing it up to now, and we just kind of got our feet wet with it. And yeah, it's a little bit nerve-wracking, but there's a lot of help to be had. And with the technology we got, that kind of keeps the precision and the rates right on. It shouldn't be a problem.
Oh, that's good.
We do come back and side dress nitrogen at the same time that we interseed cover crops into the corn rows.
And at what point are you interseeding into your corn rows?
When the corn's in the 4 to 5 leaf stage,
Okay.
usually when we get that done. We're still learning.
Yeah,
First years we were in this, it was really nerve-wracking to go and seed cover crops into your crop. You know, that's why we spray and keep the weeds out, to keep the competition from the corn.
Mm-hmm.
So the first years we were nervous, and we were seeding just before the rows closed, but we just weren't getting any success with that. We've gone earlier and earlier, and we're finding, you know, that cover crop needs to get started, and then it goes dormant under the canopy and really doesn't compete with the corn. So that's been one of the biggest things. And then there's always too dry to germinate, or the corn gets too big because of a rain. And there's always challenges with getting that seeding done.
Mm-hmm. So would you say that it's been a little bit more challenging dealing with how sporadic Mother Nature can be? Well, since switching to this, or have you noticed that you feel a little bit more comfortable, you know, because maybe your soils hold up better, and so you get a little bit of rain and you're not as nervous about getting into plant, or, you know, things like that?
Yeah, we really don't get delayed by the planting, and a lot of guys think if you don't have the residue removed and that soil's black, it's not going to warm up and your crop's going to get started slow. But we're finding that having the living root growing out there actually brings the soil temperature up without having to be black.
Absolutely, absolutely.
And it is black in the strip where the corn is, usually. So
as long as you can minimize that competition in the beginning, you're usually pretty set then.
yep. And it even, you know, some of that cover crop will actually work as weed control too, along with the previous year's residue that keeps that stuff from coming up.
Have you had any residue issue? Like, does it build up, or does it seems to break down enough that you can manage it?
No, we were worried about that in the beginning. We thought if you do this long enough, eventually that corn residue is bound to build up if you don't bury it. But they were right. The biology comes up and takes care of it. I mean, usually after soybean harvest, we don't really see any more corn residue, you know, after bean harvest from the previous year than we did when we were in conventional.
Oh, that's interesting. So you kind of mentioned on your cover crops and how you interseed them. Could you talk maybe a little bit more about your mix that you do currently, how you kind of got here? What did you start with, and where are you now?
No, we kind of just take recommendations by the seed experts and from Holly at the Soil and Water Office here. We tried some winter rye the first years, interseeding in the spring, but the winter rye can't survive the shaded out season, so we've had to go to an annual rye. And we never have been really successful in all the acres with the interseeding. So after harvest, we dormant seed winter rye.
Okay.
Again, after the corn crop comes off. And that starts to come up in the spring then, well before planting, and then we green seed soybeans into that.
Have you noticed any benefit when harvesting after green seeding?
Yeah, it was it 2019. We had a neighbor right across the fence line. He got stuck 6 or 7 times that fall combining beans, and he had to leave some of the lower areas in the field. And we combined every acre, and we didn't even leave a track.
Wow.
It was, yeah, it's kind of amazing how it carries just because of that. Those roots and things are gives the soil more structure and it just carries better.
So we've had several years of drought or dry. Have you noticed, sometimes the fear with cover crops is, oh, it's going to steal my moisture from my cash crop. Like, have you noticed that, or does that seem to make a difference? Or?
Yeah, especially in corn. We didn't terminate the cover crop soon enough in corn, and I think we hurt our yield that one year. In beans, it's not that critical. You can seed beans and rye that's knee high. It'll work just fine, but you got to get that cover crop terminated for corn. So if you do have something growing out there in the spring and you get a wet spring and that cover crop's growing and you can't get out there to plant that corn, it gets a little nerve-wracking.
Mm-hmm.
Then on the other hand, if it's really dry, now that cover crop's out there sucking up moisture that the crop really needs. So it gets to be a management thing on short notice, watching weather forecasts.
So just a little bit more time, paying attention to what's going on all your fields and, making sure you're ready to act when you have to.
Yep, it's not stress-free.
No, I don't think any farming is, so.
Yeah, I think that's farming in general. Have you noticed anything again, obviously it's been dry lately, so I don't know how well you could answer this question, but infiltration with, changes in your soil structure after a rain, do you notice less ponding or better infiltration or, your soil, more moisture in your soil profile?
I don't know how to measure the moisture in the profile, but that's our theory, is that we're conserving moisture in these dry years. Hopefully we're getting some benefit out of it, but I don't know how you put your finger on it. As far as infiltration, there was one fall when my son was combining beans and he stopped, took a picture and sent it to me. When we have heavy rains, when we do get some ponding, temporary ponding, we share a ponding area with a neighbor and there's a fence line going right through it. His beans were all drowned out. There was still water there and we had beans and we combined right through it.
Oh, wow.
So it's pretty eye-opening.
Oh, absolutely. So when you first started, what was your reason for starting with cover crops? Were you seeing that you had that ponding, or were you seeing erosion, or what was your really aha moment to get into cover crops?
I don't know. I guess probably economics drove part of it. That's the first thing most of us are worried about is are we going to be able to maintain yields? And we've found that we have maintained our yields and we've cut our expenses way down. We've got less herbicides, less fuel, less time and labor. There's just a lot of benefits to it, we think.
So is it more of a looking at the economics, the inputs that you have to put in versus yield? How much are you still focusing on yield so much, but it's more about the inputs, or it doesn't matter so much?
We've been maintaining the yields, but I haven't done it lately. And the commodity prices and stuff are always changing. But a couple of years ago, I kind of had done some cost analysis, and I thought we could take a 35 bushel yield hit and still be better off on our bottom line because our input costs are that much less.
That's crazy to think about because everyone's kind of pushing yield, which is great because we do need to produce that, but it's the return on investment that you find in these regenerative systems has been repeatedly.
Yeah, and we have less investment out there if you are going to have a bad year.
Mm-hmm.
That's part of it too. And the way I look at it, if everybody went for the bottom line instead of for that top yield and keep increasing that yield, we would cut our supply down and keep our price up better.
Mm-hmm. Do you have any initial pushback maybe from a banker or FSA when you went to these offices and you said, hey, I want to try this? Were they concerned for you, or did you find some support there?
No, there was some support there, I guess. Of course, we don't put a lot of stock in that. You can have all kinds of programs and non-farming experts that can tell you how it works on paper, but it makes you a little nervous when your livelihood depends on it.
No, absolutely.
But the programs really do help. It sets off some of the risks starting out when you are unsure, like the CSP and EQIP and the programs through the Soil and Water District and the Hawk Creek Watershed really helps a lot to take some of that stress off.
Are you still utilizing some of these financial programs to help offset some of these costs and risks? Are you trying new things when you sign up for new programs?
Yeah, Joe and Ryan just got pre-approved for a new EQIP contract that's just going to be starting this year. There's no contract in place yet, but we're told it's coming.
No.
So they'll be tied to that for 5 years.
Is that your first equip, or have you guys done
We had
CSP?
CSP once before. So we're kind of grateful that they got this again, because sometimes when you've been through a federal program, you're not eligible to do those same things again. But I guess they've opened it up so we have a second chance.
Just because there's a lot of soil health money coming right now, and I think it's good to keep encouraging people who are doing it and, maybe trying new things. EQIP has that flexibility, unlike CSP, where, if in 2 years they want to try something new and, they can restructure it and hopefully it works out.
There's always something to learn and improve. I mean, there's, you can get all the way up to starting to do biostrips and planting into those biostrips and creating some of your own nutrients, which is really going to cut back on commercial applied fertilizer down the road.
Absolutely.
Which seems to be getting more expensive, and sometimes the supply is threatened. And we just think it's a good insurance to try to get ahead.
Oh, absolutely.
And be proactive to go after these things rather than waiting until we can't get product or the government forces us to do it this way. Just that'll go off on our own and get started.
Just kind of get your feet under you before, someone makes you do something. That way, you're the experienced one and you're the one who's not, struggling.
Yeah, it really helps that we have other people doing the same things that we're doing, and it helps if you can talk to each other and you can, not reinvent the wheel so much. If somebody's already had a failure, we can advise you not to do that. Those kinds of things are really important. And that's what the field days, that the Soil and Water District and Hawk Creek put together, that brings those people together where they can network and talk and get acquainted, and they get each other's contacts and talk back and forth. And I think that helps everybody a lot.
Absolutely. Would you say that community of farmers and other people have been your greatest resource, or have you found, government programs like the SWCD or Hawk or, other programs and people like that have also been beneficial?
It's kind of a mixture of all of the above.
All the above?
Yeah.
Takes a village, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah. So with your crop rotation, you kind of touched on it. You guys are back to just corn and soy. And how has your equipment changed that way? Have you needed to invest in a no-till drill, or how have you managed the residue when trying to plant in a no-till? Or are you strictly strip-till for everything?
Now that we have our own machine, we are going to be doing some more experimental things to see what's the best. Maybe we'll find out we want to start strip tilling for soybeans too. But right now we do have a no-till drill that we're solid seeding the beans with. And last year was the first year we tried 40 acres and we strip tilled and put corn on corn. And we're going to try that one more time this year. And we have done some modifications to that drill. We put some different closing wheels on it. And same with our planter. We changed closing wheels from the factory ones. Other than that, we just use a standard conventional planter for the corn.
So have you guys been doing all your modifications yourself, or are you bringing them somewhere and you found a really good resource
We've
to help
been
you with
pretty
that?
much doing it ourselves.
Doing it yourself? With changing to the strip till and green seeding, have you had to change like your relative maturity dates? Have you had to change anything with your seed selections, or has that relatively stayed the same?
Yeah, we're still learning some things about that too. We'd like to go to earlier variety beans just so we could get them off sooner and get a cover crop started in the fall. The earlier maturing beans don't yield as well, so that's kind of a challenge. And as far as getting cover crop interseeded in beans, when the beans are solid seeded, that doesn't work very well. So that mostly gets to be an after harvest seeding thing too. And lots of times we don't see anything in the fall. Last fall we did because we got it off early enough. We got one rain in there that got it started, but so I think it's going to be green this spring.
You think so?
It's already started and we're only barely into March.
And I don't think we've even really had a winter, so.
Right. But it's kind of a concern now too because of that cover crop where we're going to plant corn. We're going to get too big before we can plant corn. Then you don't really want to go out there and terminate that stuff because then it comes a mat of residue that's not going to dry out. So we don't like to terminate the cover crop until we've got it planted.
Oh, absolutely. Have you noticed, you said you side dress with your nitrogen
Yes.
in corn. Have you noticed anything else with your fertilizer? Have you had to increase it to make up for, maybe the cereal rye, that straw, it has a higher CN ratio and maybe you need to add more nitrogen? What have you seen with that?
We want to get that terminated in the corn because it can affect your fertility or nitrogen supply. So that's the biggest thing that we are going to make a goal of this year is that we need to get that cover crop where the corn is planted terminated quick. If we got moisture, we're going to let it go on the soybeans for a while, for maybe a week or two after planting, depending on how big it is. But if it isn't a moisture factor, I don't think it really affects the soybeans very much. And if we can get it big enough, so we kind of want a mat of dead residue between the, especially if the beans are in rows, because it really keeps the weed pressure down and probably going to save you at least one herbicide pass.
Oh, that's good.
So if you could talk to, what kind of advice would you give yourself if you could go back and give yourself advice if you're just starting out? Lessons learned that you could pass on. If somebody were to come to you and say, hey, I want to start cover crops or reduce till, who's conventionally farming right now, what are some words of advice that you'd have for them?
If you're going to interseed cover crops into corn, don't be afraid to do it early. And then in the spring, get that cover crop terminated for corn. There's a lot of leeway in soybeans, but it's pretty fussy in corn.
But you still figured out how to make it work. And, I know there's a lot of skepticism.
You only get one shot per year, so it's a slow thing to keep changing and learning. And that's why it's important to get a group together. Because we've talked about that at some group meetings with other farmers, and they said, if we can talk to each other, most of us have from start to finish about 40 crop years. And if you make a mistake, maybe it's going to take you 20 years before you get to the system that works the best for you. But you can shave a bunch of those years off by using everybody's experience together.
Absolutely. Everyone's just trying to, make their mark, and everything you did was just trying to leave it better for your boys. And, you know how important that was to have a farm pass to you and, to take it and run with it. And you want to see them have success with it too.
Yeah, I hope so. We got grandsons coming up, so hopefully they'll get a chance to carry it on too.
Have you seen we kind of touched on the infiltration and things like that, but have you seen any issues with compaction? Have you had to use certain cover crops to help with that compaction, or has it just naturally gotten better?
We don't know.
You don't know? No?
That's another one of those things that you can't really measure and know for sure. But we don't see, if you get compaction, you'll see soybeans will get real uneven. You'll have short plants where the compaction is, and they aren't seeing that. We actually saw that more often when we were in conventional till, even when we were deep ripping, and it just seems like even though we almost think this interseeding cover crops, that we don't think there's a benefit because we never see much above the ground, but I think the roots are still giving us some kind of benefit in keeping that compaction out of there. I'd like to get the brassicas to be able to have a longer season to grow, because then I know they would penetrate down and bust up hard pans and stuff like sugar beets do, but we don't get a long enough growing season to really get that benefit, which is why I would like to figure out how to introduce some other kind of a crop that we could harvest earlier and get a cover crop going, and then rotate that to kind of help with some of those compaction issues that could develop.
And or something a little shorter season, maybe peas or small
And
grain
we're
of
too
some
far
sort.
west. The canning companies won't look at us.
Don't look at you over here.
We're too far away. So, and we have the last year was the first year, and we have a crop coming up again. It's only like 15 acres, but we're growing some of our own cereal rye for our own use. So we can kind of guarantee a supply is going to be available and control the price of it a little bit.
Very
So we'll
smart.
see how that goes, and if that looks like we see a benefit on those acres from the rotation down the road, maybe it's going to give us the confidence to do it on a bigger scale with winter wheat or spring wheat, or who knows.
It's all a lot of learning, you never know what you're gonna get into season to season, and
Yeah, it keeps it interesting. You're just raising corn and beans in a conventional setting to me is boring. We always had livestock and sugar beets, and when we got down to corn and beans, I guess that's maybe why I applied and took this job almost 24 years ago. I just needed something more interesting to do.
yeah, no, absolutely. So overall, what has been the most rewarding thing about switching to this system?
And I think the reduced costs and knowing that we're keeping the soil in place. I had a picture that I should have sent you. A couple years ago, I was driving home and it was blowing and the ditches were just black until you got up to where our land started on that road, and I stopped and took a picture. It was black right to the line, and then the road ditches were white
Oh, wow.
from the snow. So we know we're keeping our soil in place, which keeps the carbon in place. And the way there's been such a big drive to low carbon produced crops there, I think there's going to be marketing opportunities coming down the road if you can prove you have a low carbon production.
Absolutely. Do you think that's going to be a driver for you in the next coming years, depending on the markets? Or do you think you and the boys are going to be a little bit more conscious of what you do and kind of go for these? Or
We're starting to pay attention, and there are companies now that are starting business of you pay a per acre fee, and they come out and monitor your field operations, and they give you an index score at the end of the year. And eventually there's going to be companies offering premiums and bidding for that low carbon produced crop if you have whatever this index score is that you need to make it qualify.
that's not going to really be a driver for you guys to change anything? Or do you think, you would find that would drive you to find a third crop, or, pretty content with what you're doing and what money you make on what you're doing right now?
We
Or?
always have our eyes open for opportunity.
So, sometimes people are hesitant or, don't want to get into the cover crops because they feel like it'll just be additional work, additional hassles, additional problems. Do you feel like it's added more issues to your farming operation, or if you just switched out, oh, this is a normal issue with conventional farming, I don't have to deal with that anymore, but now I have this issue instead? Like, are you just flip-flopping issues or you're just adding additional, or like, what's the trade-off?
Yeah, there definitely is a trade-off. I mean, we're saving expenses on some things, but then we're adding expenses with the cost of the cover crop seed. And yeah, there's always, and it's some extra operations and hassle when you're, but not really if we're going to side dress anyway. Now we have the air seeder mounted right on the side dress machine, so we do it all at one time. But there's always things to work on. We'd like to figure out a way to move a little bit more dirt behind that fertilizer halter, and I think it would help germinate our cover crop seed a little better. If you get a rain, it works, but if you could just have just a slight amount of dirt just touching that seed, it doesn't even have to plant it, but it just seems like you need a little bit of soil contact to really get the best germination.
No, absolutely. Speaking of that, have you tried aerial application with a plane? That we've seen, maybe minimal seed to soil contact.
We have tried about every which way there is. I think the first we did was aerial, and our thing was get out there before a rain and get that airflow from the plane to kind of drive that seed into the dirt. But now looking back, I think we should have done it right after the rain. When the ground was still wet, I think it would have worked better. And then we had a drill that we took out the discs in between, so we had 2 or 3 discs in a 30-inch row. So we actually were seeding with a drill between the corn rows. But that was time consuming, and we could never cover enough acres because it always seemed like you'd get a rainstorm sometime in there, and by the time you could get back out there, the corn's too big to pass under the drill.
Absolutely.
So with the side dress machine, we can just cover a lot more acres faster. And now we've been getting it done. Now we just need to have rain to activate it, which has been in short supply the last 3 years.
Oh, absolutely. Does that make you a little nervous looking at the forecast for the summer? And has that changed what you're thinking you're going to do at all? Or
yeah, who knows what the weather's going to be. We've had an open winter. It looks like we could almost go out there and start now.
So do you feel more confident with, the things that you have done with soil health, that you have improved soil health, and that way you're a little bit more, you're more resilient to those, wet times and dry times? Like, do you feel like you'd be more resilient because of the soil health practices?
To a point. But we're having a real early spring now, and this cover crop's starting to grow. And if we get into the middle of April, when we should be thinking about getting started with the planting, and then we get the wet, cool weather, cover crops like to grow in cool weather. And how big are they going to get before we're going to be able to get out there and get that crop planted? So that's the big concern now, is I know I like to turkey hunt, and the only time I got time to go, it opens like the middle of April. In the last 3 years, it's been crappy weather, sleeting and snowing on that middle of April opening. And if that happens again after the cover crop's already started good, it could be a problem. And we don't worry about that so much on the ground that's going to corn because it was beans last year and there's a lot less residue out there. So we could terminate that cover crop pretty early and it'll still dry out. But the corn stalks, if you get starting to run away from you on there, you need that cover crop to be drying up that moisture. Those stalks are never going to dry out. Then on the other hand, you can plant beans and pretty tall cover crop and still get by, but it's nervous to terminate a cover crop if you haven't got it planted because it's going to create a mat that won't dry out.
Absolutely. Have you considered doing a fresh seed strip if it does get away from you to kind of manage that residue and make your strip black again, or is that something economically
we don't really have anything to do that with? I'm just not a believer in putting a shank in the ground in the spring. needs to be done in the fall, in my opinion. And there was only 1 year on a farm that has some pretty rolly and got some side hills. And we had a fast spring thaw with some heavier rain along with it. And some of our strips washed out going down the hills. So there was kind of a gully where every row was every 30 inches. So in that case, you got to come up with something. And I built some covering discs and mounted it on the back of a four-wheeler and went one row at a time and filled those trenches in. And it didn't really work the best. So you might have to go out there with some kind of a tillage tool and just work those side hills if that does happen. But it's been 7 years now, and it only happened to us one time. So I'm not too concerned about it.
It's scary to think about if you had done the whole field, what would have happened if it wasn't just in that 30-inch strip. So. Well, is there any parting thoughts you want to leave us with, Dean? Any final comments you have to other growers considering doing cover crops?
Can't think of anything right off.
Your words of wisdom. Share your words of wisdom with us, Dean.
I don't know how wise it is. The jury's still out.
No, I mean, you have a lot of experience, a lot of knowledge. I think definitely you'd be a good resource for people to communicate with if they had questions or anything.
Well, we
I
were
don't wanna
really
offer
unsure.
that up, but-
We were really unsure going into this, but now after 7 crop years, I'm getting pretty confident that we're going to stick with it.
Do you feel like it was the right thing for your operation?
Yeah,
Yeah.
I think it is.
Good.
And it's good to see that, as a family, as we're able to come together. Was it you or was it your kids who came up with the idea to start doing
I
it?
guess it was probably me and had a lot to do with Holly.
Mm-hmm.
She first came to me with this stuff, and I said, I don't want to hear you tell me this stuff, show me. And I had a 5-acre field that sits by itself in the middle of a room 80. And I said, do what you want with that 5 acres. Don't tell me how to do it, show me how to do it.
Mm-hmm.
That's kind of how we got started.
Kind of the best way is, see it for yourself. And I mean, you never know if it's going to work for your operation or not. So you can sit here and spew all we want, but, just got to try it at some point.
Yeah, and there are lots of opportunities. I mean, there's tons of field days going
Absolutely.
on in the area, in the region, lots of meetings. So I think there's lots of opportunities to talk with other people, listen to speakers or presenters, lots of, podcasts, YouTube videos, obviously, to get more information.
Yeah, no, we're just trying anything we can to get a message out. I mean, and that's kind of why we want to bring on more people like Dean and who are willing to share their stories and, really help other growers get into this because we believe it's so important. And Dean believes it's important for other people to get in. And at least I hope you think it's important. So again, thank you so much, Dean, for being on the show. And thank you, Heidi, for helping with the interview. But it's great information that you guys have out there. And Hawk Creek is such a great resource for helping with projects like this. And you can come to them at the SWCD, whoever you wish, and we can get you pointed to someone who can help you with the program or just spitballing ideas. So yeah, I guess that wraps up today. We hope you have a better understanding of why living roots are important and green seeding. And yeah, as I said earlier, this is the Onward Soil Podcast, and we hope to see you next time.